Sinister Stories.
The Crampids Mall was alive with the spirit of Christmas. Strings of multicolored lights adorned every storefront, and the faint sound of holiday music hummed through the air. Among the seasonal attractions, none was more popular than Santa's workshop, a cozy, colorfully decorated corner near the food court. Children waited eagerly in line to meet Santa, their parents ready with cameras to capture the magic. Santa Claus, whose real name was Barry Rollins, was a man in his late 50s with a round face that suited the red suit perfectly. But Barry's smile was not genuine. He hated this job. It was a last resort after losing his construction gig earlier in the year. The season's joy felt like a cruel joke, a mockery of the bills piling up at home. Still, he managed to paste on a cheerful expression as children climbed onto his lap and rattled off their Christmas wishes. It was a steady stream of requests for video games, smartphones, and bicycles. Barry nodded, chuckled, and waved them off with a hearty, "Ho, ho, ho." But that night, everything changed. The trouble began around 8 p.m., just as the mall began to quiet down. A group of 4 teenagers were hanging out near Santa's workshop, leaning against the candy cane-striped pillars. They were dressed in dark hoodies and ripped jeans, their laughter cutting through the holiday cheer like shards of broken glass. "Hey Santa," one of them called, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What do I have to do to get on your naughty list?" The others burst into laughter. Barry ignored them, focusing on the little girl sitting on his lap, but the teens persisted. One mimicked his booming, "Ho, ho, ho," in a grotesque, exaggerated tone. Another started snapping photos on his phone, whispering to his friends while pointing at Barry. "You know what he smells like?" one of them whispered loudly enough for Barry to hear. "Desperation and whiskey." Barry's fists clenched under his gloves. He had dealt with unruly kids before, but something about these teens got under his skin. Their mockery wasn't playful. It was mean-spirited, a venomous intrusion into an already unbearable night. "Keep moving, boys," Barry said through gritted teeth. But they didn't. One of them, a lanky kid with messy blonde hair, stepped closer. "You're not really Santa, are you? You're just some loser in a suit." Barry's patience snapped. "Get out of here before I call security." The teens laughed harder. "Ooh, Santa's gonna call his elves," one jeered. Finally, a mall security guard ambled over, forcing the teens to scatter. They left with more taunts thrown over their shoulders, their laughter echoing down the corridors. The rest of Barry's shift passed in a haze. He couldn't get the teenagers out of his mind. Their sneering faces, their cutting words, it all gnawed at him like a rat chewing through wires. Every time he closed his eyes, he could hear one of these little brats laughing and mocking the Christmas cheer. When his shift ended at 10 p.m., Barry didn't head straight home. Instead, he lingered in the parking lot, smoking a cigarette in the shadow of his beat-up sedan. He spotted the teens near the arcade, laughing and shoving each other around like overgrown children. A thought crept into Barry's mind, unbidden but intoxicating. What if he didn't just let it go? What if he taught them a lesson they'd never forget? Barry waited for them to finish at the arcade, so he followed them around. The teens eventually left the mall, splitting up as they walked to their respective homes. Barry stayed far enough behind to avoid suspicion, but his focus was razor sharp. He zeroed in on the blonde kid, the one who had stepped closest, who had called him a loser. Barry trailed the boy to a quiet residential street. The kid walked with the carefree arrogance of someone who thought the world was his playground. He had earbuds in, oblivious to the shadow following him. Barry waited until the boy turned down an alley shortcut. The streetlights didn't reach this far, and the darkness was absolute. "Hey!" Barry called, his voice low and gravelly. The boy froze, pulling out one earbud. "Who's there?" Barry stepped into the dim light of a flickering lamppost at the alley's entrance. He still wore the Santa suit, his face partially obscured by the beard and hat. The boy squinted, then smirked. "Oh great, you again? What are you gonna do, jingle me to death?" Barry didn't answer. He just advanced, one slow step at a time. The boy's smirk faltered. "This isn't funny, man. Get lost." Barry reached into his pocket and pulled out a large candy cane, one of the oversized, solid sugar ones sold at the mall. Only this one had been sharpened to a deadly point. The boy's eyes widened. He stumbled backward, tripping over a garbage bag. Hey, I was just messing around." Barry lunged at him. The next morning, the blonde boy's disappearance was the talk of the town. Barry waited in his car, watching. When the boy finally stopped to check his phone, Barry made his move. He stepped out of the car, still in his Santa suit, and approached silently. The boy looked up, startled. "Dude, what are you doing here?" the teen asked, laughing nervously. "The mall's closed. You're not working." Barry didn't respond. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gift box wrapped in shiny red paper. "What's that?" the boy asked, stepping closer despite his unease. Barry tossed the box at his feet. "A present," he said. The boy hesitated, then crouched down to pick it up. He peeled back the wrapping paper to reveal a blood-stained toy reindeer. His scream was cut short by Barry, who charged at the boy while he stood in shock. The town was in a frenzy, parents terrified to let their children out of their sight. The mall increased its security, but Barry wasn't worried. He had been careful. As he was finishing his shift on Christmas Eve, a young girl sat on his lap and pleaded Santa for her brother to come home. Barry realized that her brother was blonde kid. The girl's question haunted him, and for a fleeting moment, he felt exposed. But Barry knew he couldn't stop, not until the last two teenagers paid for their cruelty. He left the mall that night with renewed resolve. It was Christmas Eve after all, the perfect time to finish what he'd started. The third teen, Kyle, was the loudest of the group. He had been the one snapping photos and shouting insults the first night. Barry remembered his face vividly, the sharp jawline, the oversized hoodie with a skull emblazoned on it, the cocky swagger. Barry had been keeping tabs on Kyle. He knew the teen would be spending Christmas Eve with his older brother, who worked the night shift at a gas station on the outskirts of town. It was the perfect opportunity. Barry parked his car a block away from the gas station and waited. Sure enough, just after 10 p.m., Kyle wandered outside, his phone glowing in his hand. He leaned against the side of the building, scrolling and laughing to himself, completely unaware of the red-suited figure watching him from the shadows. Barry approached silently, his boots crunching softly against the snow. When he was close enough, he called out, "Merry Christmas, Kyle." Kyle jumped, dropping his phone. He squinted into the darkness, his cocky demeanor faltering. "Who's there?" Barry stepped into the faint light from the gas station sign, his Santa suit dusted with snow. He was holding a large burlap sack slung over one shoulder. "You've been a very bad boy," Barry said, his voice low and cold. Kyle's face paled. "Man, what the hell? Is this some kind of joke?" Barry didn't respond. He dropped the sack, and from it, he pulled a baseball bat wrapped in strings of Christmas lights. Kyle's bravado returned in an instant. "You think you can scare me with that Santa act? Get out of here before I call the cops." Barry tilted his head, a sinister smile spreading beneath his fake beard. "Go ahead, call them. You won't get the chance." Kyle barely had time to react before Barry swung the bat. The lights twinkled brightly as the wood connected with Kyle's ribs, sending him sprawling into the snow. He tried to scramble to his feet, but Barry was relentless, the bat descending again and again until the only sound was the soft hum of Christmas carols drifting from inside the gas station. Barry dragged Kyle's limp body into the sack and disappeared into the night. The last teen, Marcus, was the ringleader, the one who had started it all. Marcus had been the first to mock Barry, the first to push him over the edge. Saving him for last was deliberate. Barry wanted Marcus to feel the weight of inevitability. On Christmas morning, Marcus woke to loud sound coming from outside. He went downstairs and opened the door to find a small box on his doorstep. It was wrapped in red and green paper with a tag that read, "To Marcus from Santa." Curious and slightly uneasy, Marcus brought the box inside and opened it. Inside was a cracked smartphone, Kyle's phone. Marcus froze, his mind racing. He hadn't seen or heard from Kyle in days. He'd assumed his friend was just laying low, but now... His phone buzzed, and he nearly dropped it in fright. A text had come through from an unknown number. "You're next." Marcus's hands trembled as he typed back. "Who is this?" The response came instantly. "Santa." Panic set in. Marcus locked all the doors and windows, his heart pounding. Marcus decided not to call the police, but just to wait and see what happens. Hours passed, and nothing happened. Slowly, Marcus began to think it might be a prank, but as the sun set and shadows filled his home, the fear returned. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside felt like a prelude to something terrible. And then, there was a knock at the door. Marcus froze. The knock came again, louder this time. "Who's there?" he called, his voice cracking. "Special delivery," a voice replied. It was deep and jovial, with a hint of malice. Marcus didn't move. He backed away from the door, his hands shaking. But then, the knocking stopped, replaced by the sound of shattering glass. Barry climbed through the broken window, his Santa suit stained with blood. He held the same candy cane knife he had used on his first victim. "Did you really think I wouldn't find you?" Barry asked, his voice calm but deadly. Marcus grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, holding it out in front of him. "Stay back," he shouted. Barry laughed, a deep, guttural sound. "You don't get to call the shots anymore, Marcus. You've been a very bad boy." Marcus lunged, but Barry was quicker. He dodged the attack and shoved Marcus into the wall, the knife clattering to the floor. Before Marcus could recover, Barry was on him, the candy cane knife gleaming in the dim light. As Marcus screamed, Barry leaned in close, his voice a sinister whisper. "Merry Christmas." The disappearances of the 4 teenagers shook the town. The police found no bodies, only strange clues. A trail of candy canes, blood-stained wrapping paper, and a single red glove left near the gas station. On the following Christmas Eve, a new Santa appeared at the mall. He was younger, friendlier, and full of holiday cheer. He greeted children and handed out candy canes with sheer happiness. And in the shadow of a snow-covered tree near the parking lot, Barry stood, his red suit freshly cleaned and his candy cane knife glinting in the moonlight. After all, Santa always knew who was naughty or nice.